Welcome back to Sports from the Couch here on Mercado Airwaves and the Sports Cubicle on WCPT 820 AM, where facts matter. I'm your host, Mike Mercado, and I have the privilege to be joined with one of the best in the business, one of the best troublemakers in the business. He's behind some of the great content you could get at NBC Sports Chicago. He's also 1/3 of the Sports Adjacent podcast. He also does some great stuff so you could tell your story for loved ones. It is the one and only Tony Gill. What's up, Tony?
Mike, what up, my guy? How you doing, man?
I'm good, brother. So happy New Year, first of all. How excited are you to get this 75th anniversary of the NBA tipped off?
I'm a list guy, so I've just been waiting to see all the debates when they drop the top 75 players and update and see which one of these old heads are going to be screaming from the rooftop. Dominique Wilkins is the. I'm just so excited that that's going to happen. But I'm like you said, I'm a pseudo troublemaker, so I like I like when ruffle feathers happen.
And you know what? I think that's why the NBA is so wonderful, because it's one of the rare sports where we really can, have a debate and badger each other about different generations of players, right? Like, it's not fun to talk about Mike Trout versus Babe Ruth, right? Like, they didn't let Hispanics and black people play in the sport for 60 years, so it's like, it's not fun. But in the NBA, we could talk about Wilt and Oscar and all these dudes against some of the cats nowadays. For you, how much of it is that the league, 75 years deep, like what makes the league so fun, besides the games and the athleticism and the stars? But you think a lot of it has to do with like old heads and the new kids can kind of just talk to each other and debate back and forth?
Yeah, I mean, throughout the 75 years and throughout, since Dr. Naismith, invented the game of basketball, it hasn't changed much in terms of the structure of what the game is. So it makes it a lot easier. I'm not saying it's, super easy, because there were rule changes and stuff like that, but visually you can kind of still compare, across generations slightly, where, the goal is put the ball in that hoop. It's fairly simple game to that aspect, and it's fun knowing that across generations of fans there's an inner connectivity with all of them if you love the game of basketball. And it's really fun. It's really great to have that. I can talk basketball with my father and he knows exactly what I'm talking about. And I know what he's talking about, and then he can teach me things, and I can teach him things about the current game. And it's just a fun way to, connect with different variations of fans across the world and across generations. So 75 years is a long time, to have a one institution, and I'm just happy to see it.
Yeah, and the fact that it's back, and there's so much parity and variety in this league. And, you talk about talking ball with your dad, and I think about talking about Bulls basketball with my old man, and how, obviously their best Bulls basketball teams were winning 6 titles. And you and I were kind of growing up to see Derrick, Ben Gordon, like those different eras in between that, and even the baby Bulls with Jamal Crawford and whatnot. And you look at this generation of Bulls basketball and the last 18 months, how crazy it is. We're going to tackle a lot of that in a second. But this Bulls team, we talk about the evolution of the league, and I think this Bulls team is kind of a microcosm of that. What did you think about kind of the offseason moves as we are here just a couple hours away? The Bulls tip off their season opener on Wednesday. How do you feel about the offseason, the success in the preseason, where we're at right now, how the Bulls kind of got here?
Very aggressive by Arturas and Mark Eversley. I thought at times overly aggressive, but they had a vision and they wanted to start winning games as soon as possible. They gave themselves half a year buffer before they made that move for Nikola Vucevic, which signaled to the city and the rest of the league that the Bulls are in it to win it, and not to win a championship, but to just be competitive again. And to a certain degree, I appreciate that mentality. That the Bulls haven't been competitive in a very long time. And I for sure would have given them the leeway, at least as much as Garpax, have gotten to actually build something sustainable and that is long lasting. But they pinpoint Zach LaVine as their starting point for the rest of their tenure as management and leading this Bulls operation. So they pinpointed Zach, said, "Hey, we're going to build around you and go from there," which I can't begrudge. Zach is a fantastic player. So building around him, if that was going to be the plan, they went to work right away this offseason, acquiring Lonzo Ball and DeMar DeRozan and Alex Caruso, and putting just guys that can play basketball at a consistent and good level. And I think that's something that was missing over the last few years, is just having basketball players that are adequate on both ends of the floor and can be consistent in their play over a course of a season. That includes health-wise. So I thought it was a very, very aggressive. I'm not saying good or bad at this point, but very aggressive. I thought the DeMar DeRozan move specifically was just aggression for aggression's sake, where they were just like, "Look, we got to make the playoffs. We got to do whatever it takes to make the playoffs."
Sure.
And I thought that was a bit short-sighted. Like, I was a bit more patient on my end as a Bulls watcher and a Bulls observer. That I thought, at least 2 years just to figure it out. But they said, no, we're going to do this right now. And now we get to see what happens.
Because we can make sense of the Lonzo Ball trade, right? It makes sense. You get a big guard, somebody who's going to be able to facilitate the offense, going to play defense. You've already kind of see it in the passing lane, at least in the preseason. And you could just look around some of the moves they've made. Vucevic, you get a big guy who's been an all-star in this league, not necessarily a rim protector, but does things that you don't find in the league unless you get Joel Embiid and some of these other cats. Can you explain to some of us the DeMar DeRozan, right? We know what he was in Toronto. We saw what happened in San Antonio. The dude's an all-star. We know he knows how to score. It's a mid-range game, which is interesting in today's league. But put yourself in the front office's mindset. Why make that move? You said it's for aggression's sake, but can you sell yourself on why you would make that move, how it benefits Zach LaVine, who's going to be the centerpiece to all that? Everything else makes sense to make him better. What about this move? What was it that you think sold them on it?
Well, I think prior relationships help. Mark Eversley was with the Toronto Raptors, and so he has a relationship with DeMar DeRozan, knows the type of person and player that he is. And I'm not saying DeMar DeRozan isn't a good basketball player. He's a very good basketball player, one of the greatest Toronto Raptors of all time. I mean, with outside of winning a championship, very successful in Toronto. But his style of play was what I was worried about in terms of, he's not really a three-point shooting threat. Not really that great defensively. He's just a mid-range guy, and he can play make, a little bit. So what required his salary, and I just didn't think it was worth it. Again, speeding up the process, I think, unnecessarily, in my opinion. But he is a really good basketball player, and the thinking is they'll figure it out. You get a lot of good basketball players. He's not a dumb basketball player. He has, a pretty decent IQ for the game. You just put him out there and you say, hey, we're going to figure this out, play defense, and we'll figure the rest out as we go along. But I think that the thing it may have been, Zach, in order for the Bulls to be competitive these last few seasons, he hasn't really had a number two guy that he could take a night off. And I don't mean like take a break, but when you have to score 30, 35, 40 points to not even win, but to be competitive in the game, that gets tough throughout a season. So the DeMar DeRozan pickup should, help out with that a little bit, where if Zach goes down, the team isn't, in dire, need of point scoring. DeMar, he can score. That's what he does. He can fill it up. And at times the Bulls didn't even have that. It was Kobe White was kind of on and off. When he was on, it was great. You thought you had this pairing with, the Sweet Life, Zach and Kobe thing going on, but that wasn't sustainable. They thought Larry Marketing was going to be the guy. We know how that happened. Wendell Carter, like all these other players just wasn't consistent enough in the ability to kind of be the number two or, the backup to Zach. And their aggression this year wanted to make sure that if Zach has a bad game, we have buffers in Vooch and DeMar DeRozan that can pick up the slack off, and hopefully Patrick Williams, he can grow into, something that, is deserving of being a top 5 pick in the NBA draft. He has all the physical tools. He seems like he has the right mindset to do that. So we'll have to see this season. But yeah, man, I mean, DeMar is a good basketball player, has the relationship with Mark Eversley, has the relationship with Vooch. They play together at USC. So there was multiple layers of connection for DeMar DeRozan here. And he's just a good guy. I think he's an experienced NBA vet that knows what he's doing at the pro level. So there are benefits to having him on the team. He wasn't just the guy that I thought would fit here long term. But he's only got a 3-year deal, so we'll see how it ends up.
And I think for most Bulls fans, what's exciting about it is that it's a change. You saw aggressiveness. It's different from the last regime of John Paxson and Gar Forman. And you see that there's professional basketball players on this team. There's going to be a professional lineup. Even if there's injuries, like if your team gets ravaged, you can only do so much. But day in and day out, they're going to have pro basketball players out there that are respected among the league. And I think that goes a long way. You may not win a championship this year, next year, or whatever the case may be, but you're not going to be a laughingstock. Guys want to play there. You're going to be a subject of talk in a good light around the association. And I think just 20 months ago that we never thought that. We were years away from that being the case. And I got to give credit to this front office, and maybe Patrick Williams will be a case just like Lonzo, not having to be the number one guy, being able to be the 5th option on this team. It's going to help the development. And you are hearing the voice of the one and only Tony Gill. Check him out on Twitter at the Tony Gill. He's behind some of the best content, sports content, specifically in the city of Chicago and all of the interweb over at NBC Sports Chicago. Check out the entire array. He's also in an amazing podcast with the Sports Adjacent podcast. They get Jason, Russell, and Tony like to get into some shenanigans. Make sure you guys check them out. Tony, before I let you go, and we're going to go a little national really fast, but where do the Bulls rank as we leave Chicago, we go national? Where do the Bulls rank? Are they anywhere from 5 to 9? Can they crack the top 4? Where do you see a team that has a Lonzo Ball, DeMar DeRozan, a Zach LaVine, a Vucevic? Where do you see them kind of landing in a now really stacked Eastern Conference?
Like I stopped predicting on the Bulls, like, a few seasons ago, just because it's like, you never know with this grouping, how they'll react. But I will say this, anything below the 6th seed, I think is a failure.
Interesting.
You don't go out of your way to make a statement like you have in the offseason to get below the 6th seed, where you probably would have ended up anyway via the play-in or whatever. So that, I think, is not acceptable. You make these moves in order to be a top 6 team, top 5 team in the East. And you're essentially saying Zach is ready to win now and win on a significant level now. Okay, this is where the big boys are now. This isn't, we're going to hold you now to a different standard. This isn't all those games like last year where it's like, man, they let that one slip away. They gave up a 20-point lead. Like, now, every one of those games are getting more scrutinized this year. All those early losses in the season, because those add up as we see, the last couple seasons. Those little bitty losses to Charlotte, to the, to lesser teams, to the Golden State Warriors when they were really, really down bad. Like, those can't happen anymore. You maybe get one on an off night, but those aren't going to be viewed the same as the last couple of years. So anything below a 6 seed, I think, is a failure for this year, even though they would be in the playoffs technically, because I think the talent on the team, at least in their starters, should have them at least at the 6 seed this year. So that's what I'm expecting, and that's what I'm going to gauge them on throughout the year. Is this a six seed in the East, or higher?
And I think that's fair.
That's kind of where I'm viewing it.
It's 100% fair because they put those expectations on themselves. And like you said, they're the ones who sped up the clock by making these moves. And I think it's only fair that if we're going to praise them for when they make great moves or they do things differently, then we have to be fair on the criticism as well. And I think that's going to be really fun on this Bulls team, just like the White Sox, just like the Bears, heck, just like the Cubs are going to be this offseason. The very least is going to be interesting, which is what we could ever ask for in our business. We are here on the Sports Cubicle on WCPT 820 AM, where facts matter, and on Sports from the Couch here on Mercado Airwaves. I'm your host, Mike Mercado, the one and only Tony Gill joining us. We have 3 quick hits to go nationally before we let Tony cause mayhem across the world. Tony, you ready to do this? I want to start off with this one. Thoughts on Kyrie and the Nets? As quickly as you can with this subject. What do you got going on a juggernaut in the Eastern Conference and this craziness with Kyrie?
They don't need him. And they proved to Kyrie to say, hey, we don't need you. We have 2 of the top 7 players in the NBA. And we can win a championship with our roster. It's like, are you going to be with us to do it or not? And Kyrie has to make that choice.
Philadelphia 76ers, Ben Simmons, it was just announced a couple hours ago before we got onto this conversation that Ben Simmons has been suspended for a game. We saw the video of him at practice. We know the entire offseason. Your thoughts on the Sixers and what's going to happen with Ben Simmons?
They're going to end up having to trade him, or at least not have him around the organization if he's going to act unprofessional like that. And it's pretty funny. The guy that, essentially tanked their season or their chances at a championship is the one causing the issues. Like it's weird. It's like it's your fault that they lost, and he's the one pretending like everybody is against him. But that's going to be interesting. I'm interested to see how that goes. But I think they'll eventually trade him, or at least just say go home.
Who in the West?
I think I'm going to go with the Lakers. I think LeBron doesn't have as much to do with this roster in terms of, putting up numbers every night. He can take a couple games off with Russell Westbrook there now, and just get ready for the playoffs. Like, this is a version of LeBron we haven't seen where he's not the favorite in any capacity. So seeing an underdog LeBron James, I think, is going to be good for the Lakers.
Milwaukee or Brooklyn?
Brooklyn. I mean, I think Kevin Durant's the best player in the world. I think he's the best player in the world last year, even though they lost. If he wears his regular shoe size versus a size up, they are in the NBA Finals. So I think Brooklyn's the best team in the East.
At the Tony Gill, check out all the work at NBC Sports Chicago, all their amazing podcasts, of course, the Sports Adjacent podcast. He also does some amazing work. If you want to get a memory done in audio format, check out the one and only Tony Gill. Tony, thank you, my brother.
All right, Mike. Peace out, bro.